Funeral Service Commission. First panel, Mr. Michael Soper, I hope I'm saying that correctly, CEO, Legacy Funeral Group, Mr. Morris Overstreet, James Lucas, and Rebecca Motley. Rebecca Motley.
I'm nervous too.
That's okay. Yep.
And I'm freezing to death, no pun intended.
We'll take care of you.
You know, at least, members, if I may, at least there haven't been any, you know, cremation jokes thrown at me, okay? So, yeah. So, anyway, with that, yeah, let's maintain our decorum here. Ms. Motley, you are recognized.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, Mr. Brian Birdwell, and the Sunset Advisory Commission for hearing my concerns today. And I wanted to add that I got tickled because Senator Nichols, you finally understand that we are able to take care of all of the death care needs on our own as people, citizens. My name is Rebecca Motley. I'm a resident of Fort Worth, Texas, a volunteer advocate speaking on behalf of the nonprofit Funeral Consumer Alliance of Texas. I have served this nonprofit for 3 years. I am also the volunteer consumer representative on the Department of Banking's Prepaid Funeral Guarantee Fund Advisory Council. We field real-time consumer questions. At the moment of overwhelming emotional caretaking of a loved one's remains, the last things on the minds of the bereaved are issues such as the cleanliness of an embalming room, adequate lighting of chapel facilities, or cemetery grounds mowing schedule. The Funeral Consumer Alliance of Texas has never received concerns over such matters from the public. The actual concerns and/or complaints of consumers deal with matters such as how do we retrieve a loved one's body away from a funeral home? Or does Funeral Consumer Alliance of Texas offer financial assistance? TFSC's website has very little to offer the consumer, and so FCAT will recommend the FTC's website, the Federal Trade Commission's website, because it is consumer-friendly, instructional, and actually provides reliable links to consumers' burial rights and useful resources. Consumers have driven the market for cremations, not the industry. Likewise, consumers will drive the market for home funerals and green burials. The funeral industry must do a better job assisting families who choose alternative burials. The convenience of self-serve checkouts, online shopping, or drive-through dining would not exist if those retail businesses had been allowed to inhibit or prevent such innovative services for consumers. Why does the funeral industry expect and demand protection from change? The funeral industry is a for-profit business with state-authorized licenses and certificates, just like car dealerships, nail salons, or event planners. Texas consumers are able to affect change in all commercial business save one, the funeral industry. I respectfully request the Sunset Advisory Commission carefully consider Funeral Consumer Alliance's appeal to eliminate the TFC. If the Commission should decide not to dissolve the TFSC, we urge you to instruct the TFSC to bring the agency back for accountability in 1 year, assisting upon implementation of specific public TFSC consumers' rights action plans, and to two-way communication venues with consumers. Respectfully, thank you.
Oh,
right on
perfect
time.
timing.
Yeah,
Everybody take notes. So, all right, thank you. Members, questions of the panel? I have one. Ms. Motley, what is a green burial? Say it again, Senator Buckingham?
No, that was going to be my question.
Okay.
Well, I'm
Yeah,
going to
what's
try
a
to
green?
answer that best I can. Mr. Bates probably could do a better job than me, but green burial...
Pull your microphone up,
I'm
please.
sorry. A green burial would mean straight into the ground. We have...
No embalming, is that what that means?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
No embalming. And we actually have, over in East Texas, there is an actual green burial cemetery close by. And so it's without embalming, without a casket, a tombstone marker. It's just straight into the ground.
Not even a marker?
You can plant a tree or...
Okay, and green is because of the natural decomposition process or the
Yes,
lack
sir.
of the chemicals of the...
Yes, sir.
Or both of those?
Both,
you said?
yeah.
Okay.
In
Yes,
West
sir.
Texas, it's brown.
Brown,
Okay.
and sometimes that can, they will use a shroud or things, like that.
Okay. But the cowboy
Straight
way,
into the
so to
ground.
speak, from the
Yes, sir.
18, okay.
Yes,
All right. Senator Nichols, you're recognized.
Ms. Motley,
Yes, sir.
I think you were here when I asked the question to Sunset staff, and they said there is no law in Texas that prohibits you from doing that. You
Yes,
might
sir.
have a city code or a county code, but Texas law allows you to do that.
Yes, sir.
And that's what's happening in my district.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There are, you certainly can't bury a body on your in your backyard. There are codes for cemeteries.
It happens in my district.
Well, it's amazing. As far as I know, Mr. Bates.
Not in city, out in the country.
Right, in the country, yes, sir. If you have a certain acreage, yes, sir.
But in your written comments, you said consumers deal with matters such as how to retrieve a loved one's body away from a funeral home, and I think that's a very interesting point. So apparently you're getting calls or complaints, somebody wants to take, it gets in one funeral home, if they want to remove it, is
Yes,
there
sir.
a process other than picking up the phone and making that request? So some people are being denied that?
Yes, sir. An example would be if someone has not planned ahead, which is the worst case scenario. So normally we get phone calls from people, they have no plans whatsoever, so they have taken the body to the closest funeral home. And if they don't want to use that funeral home, it is an effort to get the funeral home to cooperate with the family to fulfill their desires and wishes to transport it to a separate facility. It's time consuming. And
Okay.
especially at a time when a family's grieving, to make those plans in that way, it can be very difficult and challenging.
All right, thank you.
I want to follow, I have no other lights on, so I want to follow up to that if I may. Ms. Motley, when you say they get the body to the funeral home, can you delineate they? Is
Well,
it a family member? Or is it
no, sir.
a hospital? Most hospitals have their own morgue.
Well, and most hospitals don't understand that we can go and pick up the body.
We being next of kin.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So then I want to come to Mr. Soper or Mr. Lucas for your expertise here. Because look, one of the brutal difficulties here is you may have custody of the body given to you by either a hospital morgue without next of kin, or next of kin may have been notified, but the process, and either one of you can answer this, the process of getting it to you has to occur before a family member has arrived. Is that possible?
Yeah, you go ahead. No.
Is that possible?
It's possible, especially if the family is out of state. Typically, in scenarios such as that, if it's someone in a facility such as a hospital and they have a designated funeral home on file, they will contact the funeral home. The funeral home is not legally able to go and just receive a deceased into our care until we have permission. And
But
once,
the permission, is it granted by the hospital or the coroner if death is on site rather than traffic accident? or it
correct.
might-
And the first thing we would do would receive permission from the family. If it's in a case of a medical examiner, where we are at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's Office, they require the family's signature in order for us to receive their loved one into our care from the.
Okay. Now
I'll
here's,
bolt onto that, Chairman. Where we operate, which is mostly smaller rural communities, there may be a contract with the county to where if the family can't be contacted, this country hospital can't hold that body forever, so they will release us with a contract to hold the loved one until the family can be contacted, and then arrangements can be made. And to bolt onto that, if the family does then want the release of that loved one, we can't hold that body. And we can't hold
right.
it for ransom over money either. And
Right, right.
there are laws in place to protect the consumer,
Right.
and
Here's-
we cherish that.
right. Here's the dilemma that getting even more granular, let me say the
Yes, sir.
family wants the body.
Right.
Similar to when, if a doctor's having to make, decisions with a loved one medically, you got brother and sister, equal levels of consanguinity, and they disagree on disposition. Who do you take your instructions from? Have you found yourselves in circumstances where
Yeah, we do.
the next of kin has an equal level of consanguinity and there's not a superiority of one of them in state law, and now you're stuck?
What we try to do is get all next of kins to sign. Traditionally, if there's a spouse, then we're able to get the signature of the spouse.
Right.
But if it's children, just to protect ourselves and make sure that the consumer is protected and all voices are heard, if there are 3 children, we try to get all 3 children to sign the contract and come to the arrangements, or at least be aware of what the arrangements are. And that's to protect the consumer and also to protect us as small business people, so that we make sure we've dotted all of our I's and crossed our T's.
And there's also provisions in the law, if there is that dispute, that the funeral home reserves the right just to stop and for legal action, or the family to work that dispute out in court, which is very slow going.
It is, but at least that's already been delineated for your protection and for the ability of the family to react to an unexpected death.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
If I could add
All right.
something?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Birdwell, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name, forgive me. I want to make reference to the hospitals contracting with funeral homes. That goes over the head of the consumer. Those are not laws, those are policies that hospitals have. And very often, we have gotten calls, Mr. Bates has gotten a call of a hospital that won't release the body to the family, or they automatically call because they are contracted with the funeral home. They're overstepping and they're forgetting about the consumer, the person that is in charge. They're in charge, not the funeral home or the hospital at that time. Does that make sense?
Mr. Chairman.
Members, Representative Flynn. Yes, sir.
It's pretty important that everybody understands that unless there's a coroner or a JP, nobody gets to do anything to that person. And I'm not sure everybody understands that.
Well, Mr. Flynn, that, families can take the body home and have it on dry ice.
But the process cannot be started for burial unless it's been pronounced a death.
Yes, sir.
That's
All right. Seeing no other lights on for this panel, thank y'all for what y'all do. I mean, it is
Thank you.
it is tough business, but thank y'all for what you do. Thank you for joining us today. Chair calls Glenn Bauer, Jay Carnes, O.C. Robbins, and Jim Bates. Mr. Bates.
Thank you. My name is Jim Bates. I'm from Fort Worth, Texas, and I currently, as a volunteer, serve on the legal committee for Funeral Consumer Alliance at the national level. I serve at the national level for National Home Funeral Alliance on the ethics committee, and also as an advisor for the Consumer Federation of America. Today I'm speaking on behalf of the Funeral Consumer Alliance of Texas. We're a consortium of the 4 Funeral Consumer Alliance affiliates here in Texas. All of us here are volunteers in Texas. You're getting the handouts there that will go along with what I'm saying. This will be a bit of a different view from what you've heard so far. It's a more of just a higher level view and a more pervasive view of what really the situation is. And what it is a retail funeral is an optional choice like dining out, okay, if it's affordable and you like what's on the menu. But with dining out, you miss, of course, the flavor and the goodness, family closeness of a home-cooked meal. But unlike dining out, if you can't afford a retail funeral or you don't like what's on the menu, you think you have no other choice. But there are other choices other than a retail funeral. Families can do all of the funeral tasks themselves. And as it's been said in the TFSC brochure right there circled, you got it in your handout, families can do everything without using a funeral director at all. Okay, so what's happening is that most people in Texas don't know this, that the home funerals and green burials are available. They're increasing in numbers. And one of the best green burial parks in the nation. It's just east of here, out towards Bastrop, a little bit south of the big airport. But what's happening, the situation we're in, is the Texas Funeral Service Commission does little or nothing to educate the public on the choices other than retail, which brings us here. 4 of the 7 governor-appointed commissioners are required by statute to be public members. The other 3 are industry members, and that's a 57% ratio in favor of the public. But for the past 20 years, we don't show any experience from those 4 public members as far as having death care experience. So we've tried our best in the last 20 years of FCA work, going to stakeholders meeting. We attend almost every quarterly commission meeting, so on. We're just not getting the public expression and help that we need. The Funeral Commission does not have a separate website or brochure or place to go for the public like the Department of Banking, TDI, Texas Department of Insurance, and others who have very easy to obtain public health. So, but there really, in a way, there's not any need for the commission, because when you strip this down, and I've got a breakout on your handout, they are event planners, okay? Event planners. Everything they do other than embalming, which is optional and not required in any state in this United States, that's it. And there's no health thing. So let's see. 3 seconds.
If you, go ahead, if you would again, with all
yes, sir.
respect,
I'll wrap it up.
if you'd wrap it up, yeah. I don't want to give an inch and you take a mile, because we've still got another panel to go. So
we'll wrap it up.
Thank you, sir.
I'm almost done. So it's just unnecessarily regulated event planning. Death is the ultimate obvious separation, and the funeral industry continues to separate us even farther in that situation. So rather than spending $800,000 per year of taxpayers and all that, how about giving the public a gift of warmth and happiness, something like a good home-cooked dinner with family and friends, or a church potluck dinner with everyone helping out? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bates. Members, questions for this panel?
Okay, and then I guess the second question goes to Mr. Bates. Is there nothing on the Funeral Commission's website about green burial
No,
options?
there's nothing there.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Members, other questions for this panel? All right, hearing and seeing none. Thank y'all for what y'all do. Thank you for joining us today. Chair calls Jason Harrell, Bill Valley, and June Hankins. June Hankins, you're recognized.
Hello. Is this mic okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm here, I'm from San Marcos, Texas, and I'm here representing my family. And I'm here to tell you why my family believes the Texas Funeral Service Commission should be sunsetted. To make events as clear as possible, I've brought copies of a document we've prepared which explains the events more fully than I can now. Now this is quite a coincidence, because I'm going to narrate our experience with Sunset Funeral Home in Odessa. And what I want to tell you about is my father's funeral and the funeral home's failure on several aspects of helping us to honor my father. Their failure to provide a draft of an error-filled program still until just before the funeral service began, or to give us a correct obituary deadline, or most shocking and saddening of all, their failure to use the pallbearers we designated, and instead wheeling our father's casket on a garden cart tended by groundskeepers as we exited our cars. The carelessness and apparent indifference stunned us. But we realized that callous indifference does not violate funeral regulations. And your concern is whether the Texas Funeral Service Commission responds properly to violations of the regulations. We complained about several violations, and the commission found Sunset Funeral Home guilty of 3. First, my sister and I preferred a plain wood casket, but staff told us that it could be used only for burial, only for cremation, not burial. We knew better than that, but at the time, we had no heart for arguments, and we chose another casket. Second, the funeral home staff came to the house where our family had gathered right after the funeral and asked my brother to sign a statement of goods and services, which was falsely dated 3 days before the service. The funeral commission...
Ms. Hankins, let me...
I'm sorry.
No. You're clearly testifying on an issue of great concern, and I absolutely want to respect that. While you're taking a breath, I want to afford you some time to tell us, I want to be more gracious than I have been with other folks. But I want you to work through...
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, not at all.
I've gone very slowly.
No, that's okay. But here's what I'm really wanting to try to do. You've given us your statement, so instead of reading us your statement, because we'll get the opportunity to read it, surmise it with the key aspects you'd have, because what I don't want to be disrespectful to you, because look, just like a funeral service, you're telling us a very emotional story, and I don't want to just simply have the arbitrary, here's your 3 minutes, it's up, and treat you disrespectfully. But I also can't let the hearing go long.
I understand. In fact, I only have a little more to tell you.
Please tell me what you want to tell me, and I want to be respectful to you. So you are recognized.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And I think what's relevant here is how the funeral commission responded when we asked for their help. The funeral commission issued 2 letters of warning regarding the 2 violations I just mentioned, and also found that Sunset had overcharged us for the obituary, and wrote another letter of warning for that violation. The commission assessed no fines or other penalties, and it required them to refund the obituary charges, and Sunset claimed they found the error rather than the commission. And they told Sunset to file a report describing what training they would be conducting to correct these mistakes and the dates on which they would do that. Although Sunset submitted a letter purporting to describe compliance with these orders, the letter merely stated that Sunset conducts periodic staff training. No remedial training is mentioned nor dates given. The funeral commission asked nothing more after receiving this letter, and we even pointed out to the commission that it was kind of a non-compliance statement. And it took us 18 months and a Public Information Act request to learn everything about the action the commission has taken. And sir, here's my closing statement. We expected the funeral commission to fulfill its mission to require the highest standards of professional and ethical conduct from the funeral and death care industry. We hoped it would uphold families' interests. Instead, we came away from this experience feeling strongly that the last thing this commission wants to do is inconvenience funeral homes that violate funeral regulations and mistreat families. And it has done little to motivate Sunset Funeral Home to change its ways. And we conclude that maintaining this commission wastes taxpayers' money, and we ask you to turn over its regulatory responsibilities to an agency that would truly be responsible, such as the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. And I apologize
No,
for
Ms.
taking
Ms.
more than
Hankins, please don't apologize. I'm trying to be respectful and not rude, but also ensure that there's a finite amount of time.
I understand.
Because, look, I realize it's an emotional issue, and I think everybody in here recognizes I'm not going to be rude to you, and they got it, and they understand why. And so, but I very much appreciate your graciousness and the coming out, because, look, coming out from, whether it's different parts of the state, having your input is very vital. We very much appreciate it, Ms. Hankins.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions of the panel? All right, hearing and seeing none. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you all. That concludes the number of public testimony wishing to testify that I have on my sign-up roster. We will read the registered but not testifying into the record. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on the sunset report for the Texas Funeral Service Commission? Hearing and seeing none. Public testimony is closed.